It's important to remember the lessons of the past to build a better future.
My name is Cordelia Mae Thompson, and I'm 82 years old now. Most folks around Millbrook Retirement Village know me as the lady who bakes the best pecan pie for the monthly potlucks. But what they don't know is the story I'm about to tell you, a story that shaped me into the woman I became, and why I never, ever let anyone silence my voice again. It was Thanksgiving 1987. I was just 45 then, working double shifts at the county hospital as a nurse to keep food on the table after my divorce. My ex-husband, Franklin, had remarried a woman named Velma Prescott, 20 years younger, with a smile that could charm paint off a barn door, but a heart colder than a January morning in Vermont. The invitation came 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. "Cordelia, the children should spend the holiday with their father," Velma had said over the phone, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Family first, you know." My heart ached thinking about my babies, Jasper, 16, and little Magnolia, just 12, spending their first major holiday without me since the divorce. But I swallowed my pride. "Of course," I replied, though every fiber of my being screamed against it. "What can I bring?" "Oh, don't trouble yourself," she cooed. "We have everything handled." The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Jasper called me, his voice shaky. "Mom, can you come? Please? Velma says I can't invite you, but I need you here." The desperation in my son's voice sent chills down my spine. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I arrived at Franklin's colonial-style home on Maple Street that Thursday afternoon, carrying my famous green bean casserole, despite Velma's protests. The house looked picture-perfect from the outside: white picket fence, manicured lawn, autumn wreaths on the door. But inside, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. Velma greeted me at the door, her smile so forced it looked painful. "Cordelia, how unexpected." She wore a burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her platinum blonde hair styled to perfection. Everything about her screamed money and status, things she knew I couldn't provide my children anymore. Franklin emerged from the living room, and my heart still skipped a beat after all these years. Tall, broad-shouldered, with those green eyes that had once looked at me like I hung the moon. Now those same eyes avoided mine entirely. "Velma, I told you Cordelia was coming." "Did you?" Velma's voice carried a dangerous edge. "How silly of me to forget." "The green bean casserole is delicious, Mom," Magnolia said, whispering. Velma's fork clanged against her plate. "Magnolia, you've had enough. A young lady needs to watch her figure." She turned those ice-blue eyes toward me. "Cordelia, perhaps you could teach your daughter about portion control. She's getting quite plump." My 12-year-old daughter's face crumpled. Magnolia had always been sensitive about her weight, and Velma knew exactly where to strike. I felt my blood pressure rising, but I kept my voice steady. "Magnolia is perfect exactly as she is." "Of course you'd say that," Velma laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You were always too permissive. It's no wonder the children need more discipline when they're here." Franklin carved the turkey with violent precision, each slice falling with a wet thud. "Velma's right, Cordelia. The kids need structure, rules, something they're clearly not getting at your apartment." The word apartment dripped from his mouth like an insult. Yes, I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment above Mrs. Henderson's flower shop. Yes, the walls were thin and the heat barely worked in winter, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the smell of homemade cookies. It was home. Don't miss what happens next. You won't believe how far Velma goes to humiliate me in front of my own children. The dining room looked like something from a magazine spread. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight, casting rainbow patterns across the mahogany table. China plates with delicate blue roses sat at each place setting, and the turkey gleamed golden brown at the head of the table where Franklin carved with theatrical precision. My children sat stiffly in their chairs. Jasper's jaw was clenched tight, his dark hair falling across eyes that mirrored my own pain. Magnolia, my sweet girl with her father's green eyes and my stubborn chin, kept glancing between me and Velma like she was watching a tennis match. "Jasper, tell your mother about your grades," Velma said, settling into her chair with the grace of a queen claiming her throne. "He's struggling in algebra, probably needs more structure at home." The implication hung in the air like smoke. My son's cheeks flushed red. "I'm doing fine, Mom. Don't listen to her." "Jasper," Franklin's voice boomed across the table. "That's no way to speak to Velma. She's been nothing but good to you kids." I watched my ex-husband defend this woman who'd been systematically poisoning my relationship with my children for months. Phone calls cut short, weekend visits mysteriously canceled, birthday gifts I'd sent that never reached their intended recipients. "Pass the cranberry sauce," I said, desperate to change the subject. Velma reached for the crystal bowl, then seemed to stumble. The bowl tilted, and crimson sauce splattered across my cream-colored blouse, the only nice thing I owned that wasn't a uniform. "Oh my!" Velma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I'm so sorry, Cordelia." But her eyes weren't sorry. They glittered with satisfaction as I dabbed helplessly at the spreading stain. The sauce was warm and sticky, and I knew it would never come out completely. "Mom, here!" Magnolia started to rise, reaching for her napkin. "Sit down, Magnolia." Velma's voice cracked like a whip. "Your mother can handle her own messes. She's had plenty of practice." Something inside me snapped. Years of taking the high road, of biting my tongue for the sake of the children, of letting this woman systematically destroy my relationship with my own kids. It all came crashing down. I stood up slowly, cranberry sauce still dripping from my shirt. "Velma, I think we need to talk. Privately." "Oh, there's no need for privacy here," she purred. "We're all family, after all. Family first, remember?" "You're not family," I said quietly. "You're a stranger who married my ex-husband and thinks that gives you the right to parent my children." Franklin's fork clattered to his plate. "Cordelia, that's enough." "No, Franklin, it's not nearly enough." I turned back to Velma, who was watching me with the fascination of someone observing a car wreck. "You want to know what enough looks like? Enough is my daughter crying herself to sleep because you tell her she's fat. Enough is my son failing algebra because he's too stressed to concentrate. Enough is you poisoning my children against me with your lies and manipulation." Velma's mask finally slipped. "Your children? They live here now, Cordelia. They eat at my table, sleep under my roof, and follow my rules. You're nothing but a weekend visitor who brings cheap casseroles and false promises." The room went dead silent. Even Franklin looked shocked at his wife's venom, but Velma wasn't finished. "Face it, Cordelia, you lost. I won, and soon your precious children won't even remember why they ever loved you." You won't believe what happens next. This is where everything changes forever. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Magnolia was openly crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked between her parents. Jasper had gone completely pale, his hands clenched into fists on the table. "Take that back," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "Take that back right now." Velma leaned back in her chair, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "Why? It's true. Every word of it. Look at you, Cordelia, 45 years old, living in a cramped apartment, working yourself to death for minimum wage. What kind of mother does that to her children? A mother who loves them, I said fiercely. A mother who would die for them. A mother who abandoned them. Oh yes, we all know the real story. You were so focused on your precious career that you neglected Franklin, neglected your marriage, neglected your children. That's why he left you. That's why he came to me. Each word was designed to cut deep, to find the wounds I'd been trying to heal for 2 years. The guilt I carried about working so much, about missing school plays and soccer games, about the fights Franklin and I had about money and time and priorities. "Stop it," Jasper said suddenly, his voice cracking. "Just stop it, Velma. You don't know anything about Mom." Velma's eyes snapped to my son like a cobra striking. "Don't I? Then why don't you tell us about last Tuesday, Jasper, when you called her crying because you had nobody to pick you up from practice? Where was Mommy, dearest, then?" My heart shattered. I'd been pulling a double shift that day, covering for another nurse whose child was sick. I'd arranged for Jasper to write home with a teammate, but hearing it twisted like this— "I was working," I said through gritted teeth. "I was saving lives at the hospital while you were getting your nails done." "How noble," Velma sneered. "Saint Cordelia, sacrificing her children for the greater good. Tell me, how many strangers' lives are worth more than your own son's tears?" That's when I lost it. Completely, utterly lost it. I lunged forward, my hands reaching for her perfect throat, ready to wipe that smug expression off her face forever. But I never made it across the table. Velma moved faster than I had expected. Her hand shot out and connected with my cheek with a crack that echoed through the dining room. The force of it sent me stumbling backward, my hand flying to my burning face. "Don't you dare touch me," she hissed, rising to her feet like an avenging angel in burgundy silk. "I am not some trashy nurse you can brawl with in a hospital parking lot." The children were screaming. Magnolia had knocked over her chair trying to get to me, and Jasper was shouting at Velma to leave me alone. But all I could hear was the ringing in my ears and Franklin's voice cutting through the chaos. "Velma, what the hell do you think you're doing?" She turned to her husband, her face flushed with righteous indignation. "She attacked me, Franklin. Did you see? She tried to assault me in my own home." "I saw you hit my ex-wife," Franklin said, his voice deadly quiet. "In front of our children." For the first time since I'd known her, Velma looked uncertain. She was going to hurt me. I was defending myself. "Mom," Magnolia threw herself into my arms, her small body shaking with sobs. "Are you okay? Does it hurt?" I held my daughter close, feeling the sting in my cheek and the deeper ache in my heart. This was what my children would remember about Thanksgiving 1987. Not gratitude or family togetherness, but violence and hatred, and their mother being humiliated in their father's house. The doorbell rang, cutting through the terrible silence that had fallen over the dining room. We all froze, Velma with her hands still raised, me with my daughter clinging to my waist, Franklin standing helplessly between his two worlds, and Jasper pale as winter snow. "I'll get it," Franklin muttered, clearly desperate to escape the chaos in his dining room. We heard the front door open, then Franklin's surprised voice. "Ma, what are you doing here?" My heart nearly stopped. Evangeline Thompson, Franklin's mother, my former mother-in-law, and the strongest woman I'd ever known. At 78, she still ran her own farm, raised prize-winning Holstein cattle, and could outwork men half her age. She'd been conspicuously absent from our lives since the divorce, and I had assumed she'd taken Franklin's side. "Jasper called me," came her gravelly voice from the foyer. "Said there was trouble. Figured I better see for myself." Heavy footsteps approached the dining room, and then she appeared in the doorway. Evangeline Thompson was a force of nature, tall, broad-shouldered, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the color of storm clouds. She wore her best church dress, new blue with tiny flowers, and her good pearls. This was not a social call. Her gaze swept the room, taking in my tear-stained face, Velma's flushed cheeks, the upturned chair, the cranberry stain on my blouse. Those sharp eyes missed nothing. "Well," she said finally, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Isn't this a pretty picture?" Velma straightened, smoothing her skirt and arranging her features into that practiced smile. "Mrs. Thompson, what a lovely surprise. We were just having dinner." "I can see that," Evangeline interrupted, her eyes fixed on the red mark blooming across my cheek. "Jasper, take your sister upstairs, now." "But Grandma, now." The command brooked no argument. Both children fled, casting worried glances over their shoulders. Evangeline stepped fully into the room, and suddenly it felt smaller, charged with a different kind of energy. She moved to the sideboard where Franklin kept his good whiskey, poured herself 2 fingers of bourbon, and knocked it back like medicine. 38 years, she said, setting the glass down with deliberate precision. 38 years I've been waiting for someone to give me a reason to speak my mind about this situation. Franklin shifted uncomfortably. "Ma, this isn't really your business."
Boy, when you marry a woman who hits the mother of my grandchildren in my presence, it becomes my business. She turned those steel gray eyes on Velma. "What's your name again, sugar?" Velma Thompson now." She lifted her chin proudly, as if the name gave her armor. Evangeline's expression didn't change. "Well, Velma Thompson, let me tell you something about this family. We don't hit women. We don't abuse children. And we sure as hell don't disrespect the mother of those children, no matter what grievances we might have." Velma's mouth opened and closed like fish. She attacked me. I was defending myself." "Is that what you call it?" Evangeline moved closer, and despite being in her 70s, she was still an intimidating presence. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been attacking this woman for months, poisoning my grandchildren against her, keeping them from seeing her, filling their heads with lies and hatred. That's not true." "Don't." The single word stopped Velma cold. "Don't lie to me, child. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Jasper tells me everything in his letters. Every cruel word, every manipulation, every time you made that little girl cry about her weight." My heart pounded. Jasper had been writing to his grandmother? All this time, I thought we were completely alone. "Wait until you see what Grandma does next. This is the moment that changes everything." Evangeline turned to Franklin, and I'd never seen such disappointment in a mother's eyes. 46 years old, and you're still making the same mistakes you made as a teenager? Still choosing the easy path, still avoiding confrontation, still letting other people clean up your messes? Franklin's face flushed red. "Ma, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." She gestured toward me. "This woman worked herself half to death trying to hold your marriage together while you chased after anything in a skirt. When she finally had enough and filed for a divorce, did you fight for your family? Did you go to counseling? Did you try to make amends? It wasn't that simple. No, you found yourself a pretty young thing who made you feel like a big man again. And instead of co-parenting with the mother of your children like a decent human being, you let your new wife wage war against her." Velma stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. How dare you come into my house and speak to me like this? I don't care if he's his mother. Your house? Evangeline's laugh was harsh as winter wind. Child, this house belongs to Franklin Thompson, and Franklin Thompson came from me, which means I've got more right to be here than you do. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even I could feel the power radiating from this elderly woman who'd raised 6 children on a farm during the Great Depression, who'd buried a husband and 2 sons, who'd weathered every storm life could throw at her. Now let me tell you how this is gonna work, Evangeline continued, her voice calm but implacable as granite. You're going to apologize to Cordelia, a real apology, not some mealy-mouthed excuse. You're going to promise that you will never, ever lay a hand on her again, and you're going to stop this campaign of hatred against the mother of my grandchildren. I will not! The slap came so fast I barely saw it. Evangeline's weathered hand connected with Velma's cheek with a crack that made my own face throb in sympathy. Velma staggered backward, her hand flying to her face, her eyes wide with shock. You want to hit people? Evangeline asked conversationally. Let's see how you like it. Franklin stepped forward. Ma, stop! Stay out of this, Franklin. This is between women now. She turned back to Velma, who was cowering against the sideboard. 40 years younger than me, and you can't even take what you dish out? Pathetic. I found my voice at last. Mrs. Thompson, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She kept her eyes on Velma. I've been silent for 2 years, watching this travesty unfold, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But when my grandson calls me in tears, telling me that his stepmother hit his mother at Thanksgiving dinner, that's when silence becomes complicity. Velma was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. You can't just hit me. I'll call the police. Go ahead, Evangeline said pleasantly. Explain to them how you assaulted the mother of 2 minor children in front of those children and how an old lady defended her. See which one of them they arrest. The fight went out of Velma like air from a punctured balloon. She slumped against the sideboard, her perfect hair disheveled, her expensive dress wrinkled. I'm sorry, she whispered. Louder, Evangeline commanded, so Cordelia can hear you. I'm sorry, Cordelia. I shouldn't have hit you. It wasn't much of an apology, but it was more than I'd ever expected to get from this woman. Evangeline wasn't finished. She poured herself another bourbon and settled into Franklin's chair at the head of the table like a judge taking the bench. Now that we've got the violence sorted out, let's talk about the real problem here. Franklin loosened his tie, looking like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. Ma, please. The real problem here is that you've forgotten what family means. Family doesn't mean choosing sides. It doesn't mean allowing your new wife to torture your ex-wife. It doesn't mean letting your children suffer because the adults in their lives can't act civilized. She turned to me, and her expression softened slightly. Cordelia, I owe you an apology, too. I should have spoken up months ago. I should have stopped this before it got this far. Tears burned my eyes. Mrs. Thompson, I thought you hated me. I thought you blamed me for the divorce. Honey, I've been married for 53 years. I know exactly how marriages fall apart, and it's never just one person's fault. But what happened after the divorce? That's on Franklin and his choice of wife. Velma flinched at the emphasis on choice. You want to know what I think? I think Franklin was a fool to let you go. I think he traded a good woman for a pretty face and a willing ego stroke. And I think these children are paying the price for his midlife crisis. Ma, don't mind me. It's the truth and you know it. She gestured around the opulent dining room. Look at all this. Crystal and china and cloth napkins. You know what I remember from my Thanksgivings with Cordelia? Laughter, joy, children feeling safe and loved. When's the last time you heard your children laugh in this house, son? The silence stretched long enough to be uncomfortable, because we all knew the answer. It had been a very long time. Jasper wrote me last month, told me he was thinking about running away. 12 years old, and he wanted to disappear rather than live in this house. Magnolia's been having nightmares, wetting her bed again for the first time since she was 6. My heart broke all over again. My babies had been suffering, and I didn't even know it. They need their mother. Not just weekend visits and supervised phone calls. They need to know they can come to her when they're hurting, when they're scared, when they need someone who loves them unconditionally. I love them, Franklin said desperately. I love my children. Then act like it. The steel was back in Evangeline's voice. Stop letting your wife poison them against their mother. Stop making them choose between their parents. Stop pretending that your happiness is more important than theirs.
Velma spoke up, her voice small and broken. I wanted them to love me too. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw something human in Velma's eyes. Not the calculating predator, not the cruel stepmother, but a woman who was desperately insecure and had made terrible choices trying to secure her place in this family. Child, Evangeline said, not unkindly, love isn't something you can force or steal or manipulate into existence. It's something you earn through kindness, patience, and respect. You can't build your happiness on someone else's misery. The silence that followed felt different. Less charged, more contemplative. Velma had sunk into a chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Franklin stood by the window, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his mother's words, and I remained by the doorway, still processing the fact that this fierce woman had come to my defense. There's something else, Velma said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I need to tell you all. We turned to look at her. She was staring at her hands, tears still streaming down her cheeks, but her expression had changed. The mask was completely gone now, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. I can't have children, she said simply. The doctors told me years ago. Something wrong with It doesn't matter. The point is, when I married Franklin, those kids were my only chance at being a mother. The admission hung in the air like smoke. I felt my anger wavering, replaced by something I didn't expect. Pity. I know that doesn't excuse what I've done, she continued, her voice growing stronger. I know I've been terrible to you, Cordelia, to the children. I was so afraid they'd never accept me. So afraid Franklin would realize he made a mistake marrying someone who couldn't give him more children. Franklin moved to his wife's side, his hand resting uncertainly on her shoulder. Velma, honey, why didn't you tell me how scared you were? Because you married me so fast after the divorce. Because sometimes I wondered if you were just trying to prove something to yourself, or to Cordelia, or to the whole town. She looked up at him with eyes full of pain. I thought if I could just make the children choose me, make them need me more than they needed her, then you'd have to love me, really love me. Evangeline's expression had softened, but her voice remained firm. Fear doesn't give you the right to hurt innocent people, child. Those children didn't ask to be pawns in your insecurity. I know. God help me, I know. I found myself stepping forward, my nurse's instincts overriding my anger. This woman had tormented me for 2 years, but she was also clearly in tremendous pain. Velma, you could have talked to me. We could have found a way to both be part of their lives. She looked at me with genuine surprise. You would have done that? After everything I put you through? They're children, I said simply. They have enough love in their hearts for both of us if we'd let them. Franklin cleared his throat. Maybe we could start over, all of us, try to do better. Starting over isn't that simple, Evangeline interjected. There's been too much damage done, trust broken, hearts wounded. She fixed her son with a steady gaze. But healing is possible if everyone's willing to do the hard work. What kind of hard work? Franklin asked. Counseling, I said immediately. Family counseling. The children need help processing what they've been through, and all of us adults need to learn how to communicate without warfare. Velma nodded slowly. I'd be willing to try if you think it could help. It's a start, Evangeline said, but there need to be ground rules. No more manipulation, no more using the children as weapons, no more trying to erase Cordelia from their lives, and no more violence, I added, touching my still tender cheek. Velma flinched. Never again, I swear. You won't believe the surprise that's about to walk through that door. This story is far from over. Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced the return of Jasper and Magnolia. They appeared in the doorway together, my brave son with his arm protectively around his little sister's shoulders. Both had clearly been crying, but their faces showed determination too. We heard everything, Jasper said, his young voice trying to sound older than his 16 years. We were listening from the top of the stairs. Franklin started to scold them, but Evangeline held up a hand. Let them speak. They've got more right to an opinion about this mess than any of us. Magnolia stepped forward, still clinging to her brother's hand. Velma, you made me feel ugly every day. You told me I was fat and stupid and that Mom didn't want me anymore. Velma's face crumpled. Magnolia, I'm so sorry. I'm not finished, my 12-year-old daughter said with strength that made my heart swell with pride. You made me hate myself. You made me not want to eat dinner because you said I was getting plump. You made me think Mom stopped loving me because she had to work so much. Tears were streaming down Velma's face now. I never meant. Yes, you did, Jasper said quietly. You meant every word. You wanted us to hate Mom, so we love you instead. But that's not how love works. From the mouths of babes, my son had figured out in his teenage wisdom what the adults in this room had taken 2 years to understand. I love Mom because she reads to me when I have nightmares, because she taught me to braid my hair and make chocolate chip cookies, because she works extra shifts so I can have new school clothes. And I love Dad because he taught me to throw a baseball and took me camping and helped me build my science fair project. But I was starting to hate both of you because of how you treated Mom. The simple honesty of their words cut deeper than any of Evangeline's stern lectures or my own angry protests. These children had been watching, absorbing, learning from the adults in their lives. And what they learned was that love could be conditional, that parents could be cruel, that families could be battlegrounds. What do you want to happen now? I asked my children, because in the end, they were the only ones whose opinions truly mattered. Magnolia looked at her father, then at Velma, then back at me. I want to go home with you tonight, Mom. I want to sleep in my own bed and wake up tomorrow knowing nobody's going to tell me I'm fat or stupid or unwanted. And I want weekend visits with Dad to actually be visits, not interrogations about what Mom's doing wrong or lectures about why I should be grateful for Velma's sacrifices. Franklin stepped forward, his face etched with pain and regret. Kids, I'm so sorry.
I had no idea. Yes, you did, Jasper said with devastating accuracy. You just didn't want to deal with it. It was easier to let Velma handle us and pretend everything was fine. The truth of it hit Franklin like a physical blow. He sank into a chair, looking older than his 46 years. The question is, Evangeline said into the heavy silence, what are you going to do about it now? Franklin looked around the room at his sobbing wife, his hurt children, his disappointed mother, his wounded ex-wife. Whatever it takes to fix this, whatever it takes to make things right.
It might be too late for that, I said quietly. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together the same way. But they can be built into something new, Evangeline said with the wisdom of her years. Something stronger, maybe. Something better. 2 years later, I'm standing in my kitchen, not the cramped apartment kitchen above the flower shop, but the bright, airy kitchen of the house I was finally able to buy with the settlement from my nursing malpractice case. It's not as grand as Franklin and Velma's colonial, but it's ours, mine and the children's. Thanksgiving 1989 looks very different from that terrible day in 1987. Jasper, now 18 and headed to college on a partial scholarship, is mashing potatoes while complaining good-naturedly about having to help cook. Magnolia, 14 and beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with Velma's shallow standards, is setting the table with my grandmother's china, pieces I thought I'd lost forever in the divorce. Franklin and Velma are coming for dinner. Not because we're one big happy family. We're not, and we never will be. But because we've learned to be civil. More than civil, actually. We've learned to put the children first. The counseling helped. Individual therapy for each of us, family sessions with the kids, even couples counseling for Franklin and Velma to work through their own issues. It wasn't magic. There were setbacks, arguments, days when I thought the whole experiment was doomed to failure. But slowly, painfully, we built something new from the rubble of our destroyed relationships. Velma got her own therapy to deal with her infertility and the desperate insecurity that had driven her to such cruelty. She'll never be my friend, but she's no longer my enemy. She learned to love my children without trying to steal them from me, and gradually, carefully, they learned to care for her too. Franklin had to confront some hard truths about himself, about how his midlife crisis had nearly destroyed his children, about how his passivity had enabled Velma's worst behaviors. He's a better father now, more present, more willing to have the difficult conversations. And me? I learned that being strong doesn't mean bearing everything alone. I learned to accept help, to trust others with my vulnerabilities, to believe that I deserve respect and kindness. The doorbell rings, and I hear Evangeline's voice in the foyer. She's 80 now, moving a little slower, but still formidable as ever. She's become the glue that holds our fractured family together, the grandmother who insists on birthday parties and Christmas mornings and Thanksgiving dinners where everyone is welcome, but nobody gets to be cruel. "Cordelia, honey, where do you want this pie?" she calls out, carrying what I know is her famous pecan pie, the recipe she finally taught me last summer. "Counter's fine, Miss Compson." "How many times do I have to tell you to call me Evangeline?" I smile, thinking about that terrible Thanksgiving 2 years ago when I thought my world was ending. When Velma's hand connected with my face, I was certain that my children would be lost to me forever, poisoned against me by a woman who saw love as a zero-sum game. I never expected salvation to come in the form of a 78-year-old farm woman with steel gray hair and a bottle of bourbon. I never expected that moment of violence to become the catalyst for healing. I never expected that the worst day of my life would eventually lead to some of the best. The doorbell opens again, and I hear Franklin's voice, then Velma's softer tones. My children don't tense up anymore when they hear her coming. That might be the greatest miracle of all. "Mom," Magnolia appears in the doorway.
Velma brought flowers for the table. She says to tell you they're from her garden, not store-bought." It's a small gesture, but significant. Velma has learned to contribute rather than compete, to add to our family dinners rather than dominate them. "That's lovely, sweetheart. Tell her thank you." As I carry the turkey to the dining room, I catch a glimpse of myself in the hall mirror. 47 years old with laugh lines around my eyes and silver threading through my dark hair. I look like a woman who has survived, who has endured, who has come out stronger on the other side. But most importantly, I look like a woman who is loved. Not perfectly, not without complications, but genuinely and fiercely by the people who matter most. My name is Cordelia May Thompson, and this is my story of how one terrible Thanksgiving became the foundation for something better. It's a story about standing up for yourself, about the power of truth-telling, about the adults who protect children even when it costs them. But mostly, it's a story about family, not the one you're born into or the one you marry into, but the one you choose to build with love, patience, and the courage to do better than the generation before you. As we gather around the table, hands joined for grace, I catch Evangeline's eye and see her small nod of approval. The old warrior sees what she helped create, not perfection, but progress. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real one. And sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes that's everything. Did this story touch your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had someone stand up for you when you needed it most? In the meantime, on the final screen, I'm leaving you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until now.